Next up on Time Space Visualiser, I'm pleased to be chatting to two people who were involved in the opening Jodie Whittaker story of season 11, The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Sam Oatley starred as the Stenza warrior Tim Shah, and Jamie Childs directed the season opener with a lot of expectation from the fans and public alike. Hi guys, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Good.
Thank you for the introduction.
How's lockdown been for you?
Sam?
How's lockdown been? Lockdown's been interesting. I'm sure everyone, has been embarking on a very different way of life. But yeah, it's been difficult as it has for everyone. Like not seeing other people, not getting to necessarily mingle with your family in the way that you usually do. Obviously, if you've got kids, which I have, it's a very different experience. I don't think we're meant to spend 24 hours a day with our children, so that's been a very a big learning curve for us all. And yeah, but it is what it is. We've all had to do what we've had to do, and in order to make sure the world can tick and carry on, and hopefully we're getting towards some sort of normality resuming, although, who knows how long this scenario is going to be going on for, on and off. And, we might be in a new world for a little while until they find something that can squash this thing,
So, yeah, well, I mean, for me, I've been quite fortunate that I've managed to get. I was doing his Dark Materials in Cardiff, and then we were just finishing up on that, so managed to get out of there, get up north quickly. Like this was at the start before lockdown actually kicked off, and then managed to get to my granddad's house up in near Northumbria, and he's basically got quite a lot of outdoor space and stuff. So that's been quite good for me. I've actually spent more time outdoors than I've probably spent in the last 5 years. Mostly I'm in like a dark studio, and I'm sort of like quite transparent looking, and I've actually got a bit of a tan going on, which is pretty unusual for me. I don't think anyone will recognise. But in terms of yeah, like it's been quite nice because I actually moved a lot of my stuff up here on the move up, just because I had quite a lot of things stored up from Cardiff. Obviously, since I was there from doing Doctor Who right until Dark Materials, so it's nearly 3 years, 2.5 years, something like that. And I accumulated quite a lot of Doctor Who stuff actually over the period of shooting it, and got some very generous gifts and things from RL production designer and all that. So I've actually been able to sort those things out a little bit, and I've kind of like got my clapper boards out, and I was like, oh, I should get these framed up, and I've got a few other nice little things, and I've been sorting all that out and going through it all. So it's finding, there's newspaper clippings and things, and a lot of things that obviously happened when those episodes come out. Otherwise, they were just sort of in a box, like, and I'll be like, yeah, I'll deal with them one day. I've actually finally got the chance to, so it's good.
Mm-hmm. And Cardiff's so lovely as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I absolutely love being there. I mean, I only went to do one block of Doctor Who, which was the opening block with Sam, and then ended up doing the 2 blocks, and then ended up doing 2 series of Dark Materials. So I ended up staying there for like nearly 3 years. So I literally went for a couple of months, and ended up staying for 3 years. So I enjoyed it a lot.
Well, I love the city. I can't complain about it at all.
Yeah, right.
So both of you appeared both of you were involved, I should say, in the opening of Jodie's first story of season 11. How did the opportunities on Doctor Who come along for you both?
Go on, Jay.
Mine will lead into yours, I suspect, Sam. So, it was kind of a strange one for me. I got a call kind of out of the blue, just, from my agent, and Chris Chibnall had kind of like, I guess he'd heard a few things about me, and I kind of, a lot of it came from, I'd actually did a short film, which has never been released. I've never ever done anything with it. He saw it through my agent or something like that, and it's got a very much a feel of like kind of what I ended up doing with episode 1. And he just got in touch and said, look, obviously they were looking at directors who were slightly more established and things like that, but they wanted somebody who might sort of bring a fresh eye to it and would be like super collaborative and that kind of thing. And so anyway, like a few days after that, I went to have dinner with Matt Strevens, and he kind of said, like, what would you do with Doctor Who? And I was just really honest, and I said, well, I like these things about it, and these things I might tweak a little bit, and like just go at it with this kind of idea. And I was just on the same wavelength as those guys, it seemed, and I was quite honest about things. You got to be in those kind of meetings, and yeah, and then I got the job, and that was it. And obviously, super exciting for me. The fact I didn't know it was going to be Jodie, the doctor, at that point. I have a story about that, which I'll tell you later, because it's a really cool story about how I found out. But at that point, I had no idea who it was going to be. I had everyone was kind of saying maybe it was going to be a female doctor and stuff, but they wouldn't even tell me that. Like, Matt would not tell me. I was sitting at dinner saying, how interesting is a new doctor going to be? He's like, I can't tell you anything. So, but obviously, I took the job, and yeah, the rest is history. I had a great time doing it. And then Sam.
Yeah, well, kind of similar, I suppose, in a way, as far as the introductions went to Jamie. I was, I got a call from, actually, what's funny, I did a mail out to some casting directors, because I hadn't been doing, actually, it'd been pretty quiet for a while, and I hadn't done loads of different stuff, and I had just had my my show reel redone. I just literally got my show reel refinished. So I sent out my show reel to some casting directors that I hadn't seen for a while. And Andy Pryor was one of them. And Andy's been great to me throughout my career. He's been really supportive. I'm very, very fortunate that I've had a pool of casting directors that I've got on well with, that I've worked hard for, and that have really looked after me. And I sent Andy the reel, and the next week I got a call from my agent saying Andy Pryor's asked if he can see you for Doctor Who. I want to see you for it. So I was like, oh, great. Wow. And what was funny is I'd been a fan of the show when I was young, and I'd watched it when it had recommenced on television. But yeah, obviously I'd never auditioned for it, never sort of got up for it. So at first I was just like, oh, cool. Wow, this is interesting. But I got the script through, and I kind of stopped thinking about it, because I was just like, what am I going to do with this? Like, what am I going to do with this? And so I just kind of was working on it. And actually, I decided to do very little with it. I thought that the problem with these characters, sometimes you find when they get into actors' hands, is actors really embellish or overdo it, or try to do too much with it. And I had a real vivid image of what I wanted this person to be like. And actually sound like. The first thing I discovered was the voice. I just thought about the voice and what I wanted it to be vocally. And then I just thought about all the sociopathic characters I've seen in my life on screen, and the ones that I think are really successful. So like the Michael Corleones, the Hannibal Lecters, whatever it is, that are really successful. And I thought, well, what traits from each of those individuals could I bring into this character, even though it's an alien sociopath? And that's kind of how I viewed it. So I just worked on that. I wanted to focus on sounds, because I thought, seeing as he didn't speak, the character wasn't like, his first language wasn't English. I wanted to really focus on how he might use sounds and words and stuff like that. And so I thought about that, and tried to learn it as best as I could. And then, went into the meeting with Jamie and Alex and Andy, and it just kind of it clicked really quickly. It felt like in the meeting, it just felt like it clicked, and that we were all kind of on the, as Jamie says, I felt like I was on the same wavelength as them, and I knew what they wanted, and they, I think they knew what I was trying to bring to it, and we knew how to kind of eke it out of each other a bit, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it all came, and then the next day I got the call saying they wanted me to do it. So it was then it was just crazy, Then it was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm actually doing it. So yeah.
It's a nice surprise when phone calls like that come through, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you said earlier, Jamie, you had a very distinct view on how you wanted the series to look, how you wanted the sort of your directing to look on screen, and you can see a very, very visible change in the direction. And obviously, it was a bit of a reboot to a degree anyway, so that was inevitably going to happen. Did you have to go into quite a lot of discussion and planning about that, or did they just let you go with what you wanted to try and achieve?
Well, obviously, first of all, like if you're doing a show that's been running for a long time, I think you have two responsibilities. One is that you need to respect what people like about that show. The last thing you want to do is come on and like just chuck all your ideas at it, and it's completely different to everything. Especially with it already having so many new, variables and stuff with that series. But you also want to go, okay, well, look, it's gonna kind of, some fans are gonna like it, some fans aren't gonna like it, but it's also what you've got to think is it's gonna bring in new fans as well, and that's important. Like that new demographic. How do you keep refreshing a show? Like the fans of Doctor Who, some of them have been fans for years, for decades, and it's like those fans either they'll stick with the show, hopefully, or maybe they'll. But over time, you need to regenerate those fans. It's like using, no pun intended, using the word regenerate, but you have to bring in those new fans, and that's what Chris's hope was with it. Obviously, he was the showrunner and had like massive input in all sections of the show, but he did give me a lot of freedom as well with that. I mean, obviously, we're on the same page, so he was like enjoying what I was saying and the movie references and things like that. I mean, it was all movie references as well. It was like we're like, why don't we make Doctor Who the movie for episode 1? And and it had that sort of narrative about it, and like one of the main things, and I don't often talk, but it is such a visual difference straight away, is that we shot with anamorphic lenses, obviously, and that was something that I suggested right first. I said, look, why don't we shoot that and convince the BBC to allow us to have the cropped frame and stuff, and obviously like they'd done things like that before the BBC and were a little bit scared by the idea, just as you would be, but came around to it, liked the idea of it. We shot lots of tests, they loved it, and and at that time there was like there's this sort of resurgence of that kind of 1980s like nostalgia stuff, like Spielberg and things, and and that was kind of like, that's the sort of cinema I've always loved, like growing up. I always wanted to be a British filmmaker who brought a bit of that heightened reality to cinema. And the great thing with episode 1 was that Chris wanted to set it in Sheffield, and obviously Jodie is from like Yorkshire. And so it was, and I love, the films that I love films like Kes and things like that. So cinema verite, that very British, like Mike Leigh, Ken Loach style stuff as well. So I was like, why don't I mash the two together? Like, so we've got a bit of that. We go to Sheffield, use the landscape and stuff, but also bring like a Spielberg, like polished feel to it, shoot anamorphic, shoot everything on dollies. Like I didn't want handheld shots and stuff. I thought, let's elevate the, the production value like massively. And also, and the other thing that allowed us to do, Jodie, when I discussed like with Jodie how she wanted to play the Doctor, and how what she wanted, her nuance that she wanted to bring to it. She's very theatrical and like a very big actor as the Doctor. Like in terms of like choreography and stuff. And I love that kind of thing. I love actors moving with the camera and doing a lot of that stuff. So by playing like shots wider that were more cinematic, but allowing her to come into her own close-ups and be like free to move a little bit more and that kind of stuff, really, but without us just following handheld, which can look a very kind of, I don't know, like just sometimes just very TV, So like, how do we keep it cinematic? And so that was kind of like a lot of the discussion that we had. But Chris gave me a lot of that freedom to do that,
You can see it actually. There's a shot quite close to the opening where they're sat up on the top of the hillside, and you bring the camera out. And they're clearly sat on the edge, and you bring the camera out and around in front of them, and it just works so well, I think.
Oh, great! Yeah. I mean, when I suggested getting to do that shot, actually, it wasn't like I want like a really big crane shot on the end of a thing, so I'm going to be really like demanding and get a big crane up there. It was more we were actually filming quite a lot up there, and I said, well, you can get these cranes. They're called a Scarab, which is basically like a 4-wheel drive truck type thing with a crane on top. So they're amazing. You can get them in like the most complicated positions. These are on like war films and stuff like that. And anyway, we got one, and I mean, that was the most precarious I've ever seen one parked in my life. I actually have a photo of it somewhere on my phone, but it's kind of like on this angle on the side of back there. But it's amazing. And then the grips are going, no, I'll be fine, it's fine. I'm going, that doesn't look fine to me. So yeah, I think the producers are like,
You got away with that, Sam. You didn't. We had to wait till much later in the episode before he got you on top of the crane further on, and we'll talk about that.
I was lucky. I avoided that bit. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll come and talk about that in a minute. Just one more question, Jamie. Was it a deliberate decision to withhold the opening titles out of episode 1?
No. Do you mean like the title sequence?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was totally deliberate. Chris wanted to just start it like kind of like a movie. Do you know what I mean? Like you just fade from black into the story. So that which I think was a great idea. You know, it's that kind of like introduction into it, because it is something new, and it's like almost not to brand it straight away. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's a good idea. It's like, you know, otherwise you kind of like slapping the logo on, and then it's all about that, and then it becomes, you know, I think he wanted. Actually, one thing that Chris told me, kept telling me when we were editing that episode, which was a really good bit of advice for me, and it's something I've kind of used, like, you know, since on other things. It was like, let's not blow all our things in one go, you know, like let's allow it softly to build into something. And, you know, and he was thinking of the whole series. I'm thinking of that one episode as well, you know, and not go too big too quickly, just let it kind of have this little easing everybody into it. And that was a good bit of advice. And I think that was partly one reason not to put the titles on there.
Sam, you knew that you were going to be playing the villain of the piece, and it was a monster role. So inevitably, with monster roles comes difficult costumes and almost challenging to play. How much did you have a part in the costume? What was fitting like? What was it like to wear? How easy was it to work with?
I mean, you're right. Obviously, I knew that a lot of that's, again, it's a very good point to raise, because again, it's part of the reason why I knew that going to the audition and trying to do too much with it would have been foolhardy, because there was so much going to be done for me with the vision of the character anyway. So I just had to bring stuff to the table that would elevate the work that was being done by others. I'd never done any of that work before. Like, I've never done any. You know, I came to realise there's a whole profession of creature performers. I literally had no idea. Like, it wasn't something I'd ever known about. So the fittings were interesting, because I didn't know really lots about what I was going to be wearing or what I was going to be in. Getting the cast done at first was a very painful process, and I've learned a lot about what you maybe should or shouldn't do during those things, as far as how you're getting fitted and how they come up with the casts of you. But yeah, other than that, obviously, I was just there as for them to use, really, to get the costume right. And I know Jamie had real specific visions of how he wanted it to look as well. So there were constant video calls back and forward in the fittings to make sure that things were right. It was taking a lot of adjustment, the costume. I was doing quite a heavy training program when we were doing it, because I wanted to try and make the character as big as I could get. I wanted to get as muscular as I could for it, so that it tried to be as imposing as possible. So that was interesting, because I'd be going back for fittings and they would be saying, right, how much more do you think you're going to gain? Because it's getting tight. So I'd have to try and taper off what I was doing in the gym as well, so it married up. It was like trying to get ready for a wedding dress. Like, you know, don't lose too much weight, because, you know, or don't put too much weight on, because it won't fit. So there was a little bit of that, really. The first episode, the costume was definitely harder to navigate, because we were learning about it. At that time, we hadn't really been in a scenario where we were shooting with it. So we'd only been in like the sort of fitting. So suddenly doing shots where I'm running and jumping over stuff, suddenly we became aware of what the limitations or the difficulties were for the costume. But actually, that was really good, because that meant that we learned a lot for when we came back for the second episode. So it was really good. But I would be lying if I said it wasn't a hard thing to work in. But I know, don't get me wrong, from what I've heard, people have had it a lot worse than me in certain costumes. So, you know, I was lucky. I had my nice cricket cup at the front, which meant I could go to the toilet. A lot of people don't have that luxury. So, yeah.
No, you're quite right. They don't. How long did it take to fit?
Well, we did it over a course of weeks. As far as the actual fitting and the creation of the costume, it was quite a long process before the shoot obviously started, because it was such, you know, they were. I mean, Jamie will be able to add to this, I'm sure. But seeing as it was the first new villain / monster they were creating, they really wanted it to have an impact, and they really wanted it to be memorable. So it was a long process back and forward. As far as actually when you're getting into the costume and the prosthetic, from the days were long, obviously, because it's a longer thing to do. So usually you're from walking into the trailer to walking out ready was probably just under 3 hours, I'd say. If you were getting fully done, so prosthetic and costume. If you were just doing costume, it was obviously a lot quicker.
Were you happy with the end result of it, Jamie?
Yeah, I was really happy. The stuff they did with the costume was great, and like last minute, I was actually quite involved in that costume, like from the start, just because it was one of the first things that we were kind of working out what it was going to look like. And Chris had this idea for the baddie, and what he wanted with him. But like even things like I remember, obviously we had creature designers and stuff on it, but I remember like at the very, very beginning, like a lot of my time would be spent sketching something and be like, what do you think about this, Chris? What do you think about this, Chris? What do you think about this, Chris? And, and I remember one night I was like, I was in Cardiff and we were about to go out like for some dinner or something. And I just sent like an idea for the mask, like what the mask was going to look like, these like the hexagons and stuff. And that was something I'd found something somewhere that was like, not the same by any means, but like inspired like that idea of me, and it kind of like just what would look quite alien, and have like a kind of an insect quality about it or something like that, but also like futuristic, but not like Blade Runner-y too much. It wanted it to feel a bit kind of almost like it was I don't know, like cast out of like rock or granite-y something, not like super clean cut metal, like it wanted to look like cast or something. And then I drew that mask idea, and like Chris just was like, yeah, that's great, like finally we've hit the nail on the head, like he really, really liked that. And then obviously we sent that off to Millennium FX, and they started like to, I think like my idea that I had, they were just like, yeah, that's never going to work on an actual fit. I mean, that's the problem with a creature costume, and someone's got to fit in it. So you come up with like a really cool idea, and then they're like, yeah, but anatomically it doesn't work at all. Like, you know what I mean? It will not look like that once it's on a human body. So you're always finding that balance between the two, like what looks really cool and what's actually going to be able to like Sam will actually be able to bend at the knee. But you've always got that problem going on. And I mean, like those costumes, I mean, the thing is, no matter how good they are, like they always can end up looking like a rubber costume at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? But I think a lot of that is like, where do you show it? Like, how much light do you put in it? Like, you don't let him ever be lit by like a fluorescent light in a hospital. Like, make sure he's always backlit and smoky. And one of the final editions was, I was speaking to Danny Hargreaves, who was a special effects guy, and I think I was watching actually Blade Runner 2049. It had just come out at the time, and I was like listening to that soundtrack quite a lot. And I was like, Ryan Gosling's car in that film like has these really cool just like lights on the back, like just like, and it just reminded me just going through like blue environments. And I was like, what if he had like a backpack with like some lights, and that was kind of like almost like a regulator for his whatever he breathes. So we kind of added that right at the last minute, and then put actual two smoke things in it. So he's constantly, because the thing is, again, like going back to rubber costume, it can look very like stuck on and very rigid, and there's no movement, so you can't have wind and stuff around it. It just looks like always just like kind of stuck there, which is one of the problems with CG as well. But you know, by putting them on there, all of a sudden his movement and like he had like atmosphere around him, and that just changed it straight away, give it life, you know.
You can see that especially when you're in the crane sequence. I mean, that in itself, the whole sequence of the crane, where you've got the Doctor and you've got Tim, and you're up on top there. I mean, that must have been difficult to achieve, but very impressive. How was it for both of you during those sequences?
That was my first shoot day. So that was like, yeah, it was like coming into a mega film, and the first day's your love scene with someone. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's just in you go straight away. Like, so yeah, it was a real sort of, we were like, oh wow, we're on the crane, and wow, like blah, blah, blah. So it was great fun and actually, what was great about that is that it kind of got you. It was like a weird your flight or fight things kick in, because suddenly you're like, right, we're at the business end, I'm on the crane, this is arguably some of the most important stuff for the characters in the episode, let's just go. Like, let's just go. Let's just do it. Let's not worry. Let's not talk about it. Let's not build up to it. Let's just hit it. So actually, in a weird way, that was really lovely because it got, I mean, and I don't know whether Jamie remembers, but it got us thinking about stuff that ended up feeding the character, my character specifically, talking about it here, for the rest of the episode and also for the second episode. So I remember I got on set after I'd just got ready for the first time, and obviously everyone's taking pictures of them with you because you got your full get up on, and so that was a real laugh. But then me and Jamie were just talking about how he would walk and move and stalk, and I said to Jamie that I really like the idea of him being like an old school boxer, like a real old, like 1940s Rocky Marciano style boxing, like so that he walked and it kind of rolled in his shoulders and kind of moved in this weird kind of, you know, pattern. And so what was lovely is it forced us to probably have conversations and make decisions very quickly that we wouldn't have done if it had been shot in a different sequence. Do you know what I mean? And that was lovely because then you really started to think about things that were going to feed into the storyline and the character and the other characters earlier on in the episode, and obviously later on in the second episode as well. So yeah, it was quite a baptism of fire, definitely.
And you certainly challenged yourself, Jamie. There's no two ways around that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a baptism of fire for Sam and for me and for everyone. I think, you know, like I remember when Chris had sort of said, like, you know, he had this final sequence of the show and he wanted it to be on a crane. And actually, funny enough, during I did a show before Doctor Who called Lucky Man, which is like with Jimmy Nesbitt in it, and the end sequence of that, like they'd had a similar idea. It was set on a building site and this guy climbs a crane and jumps off, commits suicide. And we looked into doing it, and it was just impossible. Like, they was just like, we can't get a crane, we can't do this, and there's so many problems. It was so expensive. So when I came on to Doctor Who and Chris said I want to shoot on a crane, I was like, well, it's going to be hard because I've already just tried to look into all that. And he was just like, doesn't matter, we're doing it. Like, we're going to figure it out. So we went like round the houses entirely. You know, one of my things, and one of the things that I pitched to them right from the start was that, like, you know, if we're going to make a show like this, let's keep everything practical as much as possible. Like, I don't want loads of CG in it and stuff like that. So, you know, with the crane, it was like, right, what do we do? Like, we're going to have to film on a crane somehow. And that's going to be like, you know, once you're up in the air on a massive crane, it's just impossible. I mean, you can't get a crew up there and stuff like that. Plus it's terrifying, which I did actually go to the one in Sheffield and go up the top properly just to have a look to see what it looks like from the top of a crane, which is terrifying. Yeah. Anyway, so we kind of started with like, maybe we'll get a section of crane and we'll do it in the studio, and because obviously like the producers have done Doctor Who for ages and they're just like, it rains every day in Wales, like we can't do this outside because it will just rain. And I was like, but we can't do it in the studio, it's not big enough. Like, you know, what we're going to do, green screen, and then it's not going to look real, and it's also going to be really expensive because actually by doing it that way, it costs more because every single shot is a CG shot, and you know, they're not cheap. Like, and on a Doctor Who budget, you're really going to struggle. So we kind of priced that up, and it came in like more than the entire episode had as a budget. And then Nikki was like, okay, let's do it outside. I don't care if it rains. So Arwell managed to get in touch with a crane company where we actually shot the ground stuff, which is in Sheffield. And they like give us a crane basically, but it was like, but obviously to do it, so we did build a full-size crane, but like not as high off the ground, so it was just one section of it. And but the biggest challenge of the whole thing, which actually doesn't seem like it would be, was finding a place to do that. So you had to obviously set a crane up, but if you're only like one section of crane off the ground, when you're filming on top of that crane, you're at the same height as what's around you, so then you don't look high. So we had to try and find somewhere that was really flat or on a hill. And then obviously if you're on a hill, it's like, then you're not allowed to set a crane up on there. And we ended up finding, like, was actually not that far from the studio in the end. There's like the dockyards, which has like loads of flat grounds, and then the city's quite far away. So once you're up there at night, it looks like you're really high. And it was high. I mean, we were still 15 meters or something off the ground. So once you're up there, I mean, you know, a little mesh floor, and lots of people are afraid of heights. I mean, it was definitely not for the faint-hearted once you're up there.
And I'm hopeless with heights as well, so I can see what you're saying there. We're going to take a break at this stage. Part 2 of this fascinating discussion can be found exclusively on our YouTube channel immediately following tonight's Time Space Visualiser.